to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lee.
You're
I
welcome.
wanted to
Thank you.
welcome the other panelists tonight. We have Town Councilor Renu Engelhardt, Councilor Karen Corenthal, Town Manager Andrew Nada, our Town Clerk Lee Carney, our Town Solicitor Andrew M. Tights, and helping us on the IT side is our IT Director Wendy Schmidl and also Don Parry. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for your help with the IT tonight, Wendy and Don. So the first order of business is public comment. So this is a period of time for members of the public to comment or ask questions on matters that are not on not on tonight's agenda. So if anybody does have public comment, please, if you're on the Zoom platform, you can go down to participants and click raise your hand. If I don't think anybody's calling in on phone today, if there's one phone call-in listener, you'll dial, I think, *6 to raise your hand and then *9 to unmute. Is there anyone who'd like to make any public comments tonight? If there are no public comments, then we'll move on to item 5. This is the consent calendar. This is a series of motions that can be considered together and voted on as one motion, one vote, unless one of the councilors would like to pull off one of the agenda items for further discussion. So on the consent calendar today, we have a 5-year contract extension to Sinagro Northeast LLC for the collection, transportation, treatment, and disposal of the wastewater treatment plant sludge. Back in 2006, the town accepted a bid from Sinagro for the collection of our wastewater treatment sludge. The award was for 5 years with the option to extend the contract for 3 additional 5-year options. The second 5-year option will be expiring on March 31st, 2021. Our Director of Public Works, Joseph Duarte, recommends extending the contract to Sinagro for another 5 years. We do have Mr. Duarte here today if there's any additional questions. The second item on the consent calendar is the award of the bid to Morton Salt to provide road salt for our town. This was awarded to Morton Salt through the State of Rhode Island Master Price Agreement. So this is a state-approved list of qualified vendors that can be used by all the cities and towns in Rhode Island. We don't have to put it out to general bid if the vendor is on the Master Price Agreement, and this award was recommended by Mr. Duarte to Morton Salt. Item 5C, approval of performance bond reduction for Cedar Hill Farm subdivision in the amount of $176,000. The original performance bond on this project was $727,000, and the developer has completed a substantial amount of the public improvements and is requesting that the bond be reduced. Mr. Duarte recommends that the bond be reduced to $176,000 to cover the remainder of the public improvements. Items 5D and E are applicants for renewal of private detective license. 5A is to Andre Rock for private detective license. 5E is to Kevin Hopkins, who is looking for a license as well. The town council must approve all private detective licenses. And I think that is all of our consent calendar agenda items. Is there anyone who would like to pull any of those items off of the list?
No, I'm good.
Okay, hearing nobody wanting to further discuss any of these items, I'd ask for a motion to pass the consent calendar in its entirety.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar in its entirety.
I'll second.
Motion from Councilor Corenthal, second by Councilor Engelhardt. I'll call the roll. Councilor Corenthal,
Aye.
Councilor Engelhardt.
Aye.
I vote, Mark Schwager votes aye. Motion carries 3-0. This brings us to item 6, which is reports and presentations. The only agenda item tonight under our reports is report from town manager on projects, initiatives, COVID-19 response, and public safety updates. Mr. Nada, before you begin, I just want to say hello to Councilor Zarella, who has joined us. Welcome, Michael.
I would have voted aye, but I couldn't get my speaker to work.
So, Mr. Nada, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Swager and members of the council. As is normally the case, a fairly lengthy report. I'm gonna, at a high level, cover most of the topics and then jump into a little more depth on a few of them that I think are worthy of a little more coverage. So what I opted to do is the first several pages of the report are just some minor updates and information. I'm going to continue to carry this along in the first few pages. I think it's critical information relative to available services and support services that are really cover almost every area you could imagine around the state of Rhode Island where a resident might need some type of support, traditionally COVID related in this respect. One thing I did not, and every so often I do this, and I didn't include it in this report, I provide a little more depth on the State Operations Center situational report. And that is a basic report put out by Rhode Island Emergency Management, which covers a lot of ground in a few pages. It's highlighted the 85 executive orders that have been issued by the governor. It covers current response operations. It focuses on, you know, the almost 27,000 positive cases that we've had, COVID cases we've had in Rhode Island. The fact that as of today we have 13 Rhode Island residents in the ICU and 4 on ventilators. We've had just over 1,100 fatalities. And then it runs into a little more depth regarding the focus on some of the priorities that are happening statewide that you don't always hear about unless you really track all of the news. So a few of these I'd just like to highlight for you, where what they're noting in this report is that the state labs for testing are just about at capacity. They focus on that increasing testing capabilities has been increased to just over 3,000 a day in the state. That the state goal is to retain about 20% of our available PPE materials as a reserve stockpile. I was recently on a statewide call in that respect with the general of the National Guard. And so what you're seeing from the state level down through the National Guard to municipalities is that there's a focus on municipalities providing for.
You're muted.
Andy, we just lost your sound, Andy. There you
Sorry
go.
about that. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, that I must have hit it with a paper. Regarding the state goal and the 20% PPE. So when I was communicating on that state call with the general, you know, it's clear coming down from the state level down, it's a lot easier for the National Guard to secure PPE than it is for 39 cities and towns individually to be utilizing critical resources that we have available to stockpile an amount that no one's really even sure about. So, and the fact is we all compete with each other when we secure PPE products. So I think in a very politically correct way, I think the general knew exactly what I was asking him, and really it was to try to give us some perspective so that I know how important that purchase is going to be, because for us to really stockpile a significant amount of PPE, it's going to take away from other resources that we have directed at other priorities. So I think there's still an ongoing dialogue on that. We still have the ability to recover 75%, but from my perspective and many around the state, and the National Guard and REMA still are providing cities and towns with PPE on a periodic basis, mostly directed towards public safety, but every so often we do get some to the school districts, as well as to other municipal operations like law enforcement, as well as other just general support. So that's something that we're really hoping that the state through the National Guard just in mass quantity makes the appropriate stockpiles to assist us down the road. That's just a small example. You know, in addition, it runs through a whole series of unmet needs. some of which I've mentioned, as well as current priorities. The priorities being life safety of Rhode Island residents, PPE protection for healthcare workers, continue to protect the most at risk in nursing homes, hospitals, continue to promote social distancing, monitor phase 3 status and preparations in Rhode Island for phase 4. Not too sure we're going to see phase 4 anytime in the near future. Preparing a strategic plan for possible COVID surge, and continuing to support the reopening of schools, colleges, and universities. And there's a lot more information that runs through this separate report that I have. But something I'd like to take a moment on, I have number 1 listed under Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, which is talking about the Municipal Resiliency Task Force. I'm going to kind of combine that with number 6, which talks about state budget updates. So recently at any number of statewide calls that we have on a weekly basis, there were, more information is starting to be released from the governor's office and the administration regarding kind of the updated status on the present efforts to put together a viable FY21 budget at the state level. So with the legislature gearing up, hopefully to go back into session in November, some of the things that we've been seeing, and I included them in a paragraph in this report, were that all state departments have been requested to provide for a 15% reduction in their existing budget recommendations from FY20. So they're basically operating under the FY20 status, in addition to a number of other strategic decisions that have been made at the state level regarding furloughs and other reductions in services, and also reductions in personnel. In addition to the 15% reduction, it's starting to gain some momentum regarding a very strong expectation that we will absolutely see a municipal and education aid reduction, and probably an increase in fees at the state level across the board in many respects. So I'm getting a lot of that information on a weekly basis. So what the public may not see is a lot of my communication with the council is always very guarded and always very conservative, and of more of a concerning nature when we talk about finances. Also the topic we covered at our last meeting when we talk about the maintenance of effort requirements. So what I'll say is I had a couple of conversations today which I'm hoping are accurate and a little bit counter to my normal conservative approach in terms of being concerned with the level of uncertainty that we've had and just the uncertainty associated with state aid. So while I was doing some work, I happened to tune in to the Lieutenant Governor's, another one of his sessions on small business. And so as I was listening to Dan McKee, on a number of times in that call, he made reference to a projected statewide deficit of approximately $350 million. I wish it was 350,000. So the 350 million in a normal year would be setting off significant red flags for everybody. But in a year that a short time ago, that number was closer to $1 billion, then was settled in at around 800. And as we finished off and closed out the FY20 year, really was settling in more around the 600 million number. 350 is a pretty good number. And so I was a bit surprised at that. So I reached out on that meeting to ask the Lieutenant Governor's staff that I was very supportive and hoping that that was an accurate and real number, and was asking them about their source. So they put me in touch with Senator DePalma, who's the vice chair of the Senate Finance Committee. So the senator reached right out very quickly subsequent to that meeting. He and I had 2 separate conversations this afternoon, and stemming from communications that Senate Finance has been having with the Office of Budget and Management, as well as the Department of Revenue, that up until this point, they are seeing revenue figures that are much stronger than they had anticipated. So something that we left open, so it's not as if we're making an announcement here, is that some of the information that I provided the council with previously that was part of that Municipal Resiliency Task Force that was put out by the Department of Administration and Department of Revenue, was showcasing about a $700 million deficit. So there's a little bit of an inconsistency there. So what the senator and I were attempting to reconcile this afternoon, and we're going to hopefully have that answer in the next few days, there's two pieces of information that were being included in a different way in both reports. So in the report that I provided, which I attached to the packet today to my report, touched on two things. One was the replenishment of the capital expenditures, the capital program at the state level of about 120 million, and the replenishment of the rainy day fund. The carryover from FY 20 to 21 was about $180 million, which is just fantastic and really helped in a lot of respects. So, but when we look at the approximate 120 and of rainy day fund replenishment and the 120 in the RICAP fund replenishment, you know, you're closing in on around $250,000. So where the $350,000 million came from was the 600 million, which was a refined deficit, more positive trending that was released about a month ago, or at least several weeks ago, minus the 250 million, puts you at a number at about 350 million. The information that's included in the report that I provided, which was provided by the Department of Administration, does not separate out those numbers, doesn't separate out the 240 or the 250, which leaves the overall deficit closer to that $700 million number rather than the 350. And it also doesn't factor in yet because they're still refining some of the increased expenditure numbers. So although revenues are strong, depending upon what particular area of expenditures we're talking about, some have been less than expected, some have been more. So I think that was a bit of optimism that we saw today regarding what we see as the projected deficit at the state level. I'm not quite ready to jump from 700 or 800 million to 350 million, but I think if we're trending in any direction and it's a positive one in terms of revenue, that is very, very helpful to municipalities and school districts on a statewide level. And I'll tell you in brief why. Is with the state still holding on to between 800 to 900 million dollars, the better position that the state of Rhode Island projects and maintains through FY 21 is going to afford the governor, the administration, and the legislature the ability to provide some of the necessary funding that we hope is available for our school districts and our municipalities around the state, as well as small business, as well as many other priority targets that we're looking at statewide. So that was a bit uplifting today in terms of the report that was issued and how we were attempting to reconcile those numbers. So we'll circle back with the council as we do pretty much at every meeting and provide whatever additional updates that we can. There is some movement on a statewide basis, as you've seen in the report. I know the League of Cities and Towns has been in touch with the governor's office and RIDE regarding the council's recent resolution that was authorized at the last meeting, as well as several other cities and towns that have reacted to the resolution that you moved forward and that are interested in kind of joining that conversation, as they also know it's significantly important as we progress forward in terms of trying to sustain our public schools in an open and viable way through the rest of the year. Briefly,
can I ask you just to go back for a second on the deficit, just so it's clear, the two funds that you're mentioning that could have an impact on whether the number is 600 or 700 or 325 is the rainy day fund and the capital expenditure fund.
That's correct. Yes.
And is it that have those funds already been used to bring that number down, or they're not used yet, but they are available to be used?
Yeah, so that approximate 120 million in the rainy day fund was earmarked to be spent prior to the state seeing an increase in revenue and reduction in expenditures at the closeout of FY 20. So that was really a gift. I think there was anybody who felt that the state was going to finish and close out that year in such a strong position. So they will, of course, replenish the rainy day fund of that 100, as it's noted in the report, 117,200,000. And then
And that hasn't been done yet. So that would add to the 325 if they replenish it.
that's correct. Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so in this report that you have, it's reflected that way, Dr. Swager, where you'd add the 117. And the replenishment of the RICAP, it references there in the last paragraph about the funds for capital expenditures are no longer available following a transfer from a budget reserve in cash stabilization account per the Rhode Island General Laws 35-3-20. The RICAP fund must be repaid in the following year. So there's a question whether those two, the rainy day and the RICAP fund, neutralize each other, or they are independent of each other and will add, close to 240 million to that number, which would then bring us back up to about that $600 million deficit projection. So those are a couple of the nuances. And then there's a question about whether or not the state actually needs to take action. Do you need to replenish those funds in the rainy day fund, and do you need to replenish the RICAP or not? I think there's a question about that we're looking for some answers on. So I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to bring a couple of those issues forward, and ended up in the middle of a few engaged conversations on that today. So hopefully we'll have some updates in the very near future. I did happen to receive today on the same kind of budget and overall statewide economic condition. I did receive Len Ladaro's current conditions index report for August. And, overall, it's just a fairly stable report. His conditions index has the state at 25, which it's been stable for about 3 months now. June, July, and August have been at 25. And just so you know, and we've covered this a few times, it's really, he's noticed, he's got a whole series of variables that Len, as one of Rhode Island's top economists, evaluates and just really focuses on the Rhode Island economy. And over a period of time has really been able to track that fairly well in terms of the nuances and how our economy is structured. But back last January, February, and March, January and February at least, we're at 75. So, we're in our strong season right now, finishing off the summer as we go. And so really, we normally would hope to be even better off than 75, but we're at 25. So, and just have really not, I just think there lacks significant confidence. We're seeing some of the variability in the unemployment rate and a number of other areas that are just not showing significant confidence. Couple of things have improved dramatically, I think, and some have not. As you can imagine, as the season ends and you see our hospitality industry start to constrict, you see benefit exhaustion from those that are on unemployment. So you see that start to show itself significantly. In July, we were at 160. And now we're at 880 in terms of the percent indicators that he uses. Also, new claims back in June into July, we're at about 160, and now they're at 545 in terms of how the calculations are structured. So, unemployment rate jumped from a change in the rate from 1.5% back in July to 9.3%. So you saw a significant increase in unemployment as expected, and that's not really anticipated to be reduced as we head into the colder, slower economic seasons in Rhode Island. So, we're not really expecting to see significant positive results from this particular report, probably until hopefully the spring sometime, which is unfortunate in a lot of respects. There are a number of other things that I just want to touch on fairly quickly. One is the Take It Outside program, and I mentioned that at our last meeting briefly, but in the interim, as you know, the town, along in a joint application with the Chamber of Commerce, was awarded $75,000 in our round one application. We had applied for just over $128,000. We received $75,000. We've already have earmarked over $30,000 of that in terms of street barricades that we're going to be using to provide some 7-day-a-week access to increase capacity for a number of our restaurants. We're in the process of ordering additional signage for Main Street and other locations to assist pedestrians in crossing. We're working on some outdoor carpeting, outdoor lighting, and kind of as we speak, we have been really struggling to find anywhere in the country the outdoor patio heaters, the upright patio heaters, in a large way. So we originally were going to order 60 or 70. where we've come to grips with, we're going to try to order 40. And just this afternoon, we found a company in California that had just gotten a stockpile in. So Fred Gomes, our Rhode Island EMA liaison, works in Department of Public Works, is coordinating with this company, and Trish Sunderland, our finance director, to try to close this deal on 40 heaters. We've probably valued it close to another $20,000 of that grant to be able to support our local businesses. So I'm hoping in the morning that I get a confirmation that we secured that deal, because they're going very, very quickly. And I think everybody here on the East Coast is ordering in the country and out of the country, and they're gobbling them up as quickly as people can manufacture them. So in addition to that, we're also working on a number of tent orders that have yet to be placed, but we really remain hopeful that our $50,000 request, or $49,350 in round 2, which we expect to get word on later this week, is successful to some degree. A lot of the items that we're looking for were just Commerce RI was not able to fund, just due to the incredible demand for funds through that particular grant program. So again, working with local businesses, we had another great Sunday. We're hoping by the end of the month to kind of wrap up our street closure, but at that same time, begin to take over in select areas by reopening the street, more of the parking lane, to be able to provide businesses with 7-day access to that space. And we're going to continue to work with local business in various locations throughout town to make that happen. But really, access to any of that additional $2 million that was in round 2, we really remain hopeful on. Under number 8 in that same section, did want to report out that our fire chief and the fire department has secured an additional grant, Homeland Security grant for $30,000. Which would purchase 2 $15,000 repeaters for 2 of our fire trucks. So good work by the chief and the department again. And then in addition to that, the chief and I spoke about a month ago regarding an opportunity, and the chief scours municipal surplus sites around the country, and we entered our name into a pool to secure a backup ladder truck out of New Mexico, which was actually in excellent condition, and they were just parting with it, and we ended up coming out on top in that pool. So the chief right now is working, and that's at no cost other than the shipping. So there's a limited shipping cost that we're prepared to incur to take on a piece of equipment that normally would run us about $1.5 million plus. So to be able to forego, and clearly this is an older piece of equipment, but something that we think has tremendous value, and we're acquiring it for the shipping cost, that we think we can have it on the road very affordably and serve as a terrific backup for us as we can hopefully hold off on the acquisition of a new ladder for a little bit longer with the work that was put into securing that piece of equipment. Don't have any additional update regarding timing yet, but as soon as we know that, we will definitely let the council know. In addition to that, there was a lot of information regarding some additional FEMA and federal grants that are coming available that various town departments will be applying for. There are a number of surveys that are being released by the League of Cities and Towns regarding our work with various state agencies and just providing them with some up-to-date information regarding local costs, plus also costs that were not being reimbursed on by FEMA. I do understand we've covered some of this, and it's just still remains being a really hot topic on a statewide basis, and important in terms of us balancing, all of our interests as we move forward. Provided some additional census and Board of Elections and local mandate information on the upcoming election. Lee will cover that under her report in a few minutes. Something I did want to, one of the final topics, I did want to note that we have had a couple of staffing changes in our ranks, and did want to bring 2 important ones to your attention. We have had our tax assessor, Anthony Davey, after 3 years. Anthony has moved on and advanced to a position in the private sector. And so his last day was during the first week of October. So that position is presently vacant, and And working with Trish Sunderland, we've decided to appoint to an interim tax assessor role Chelsea Romano, who is our tax assessor aide and executive assistant to the assessor. So we'll be working very closely with Chelsea, as well as hiring on a part-time basis an experienced assessor to be able to work along with Chelsea. And our hope is that we'll be able to, Chelsea will be able to transition into that role in the coming months, and then we will circle back and backfill the tax assessor aide position. But we do like to, we're not always able to advance from within when we have that opportunity, but we really feel strongly that Chelsea would make a great fit in that role, and so we're supporting her and seeing if that's possible. In addition to that, we have had a retirement in the Community Services Department. Our Parks and Recreation Director, Community Services Director, Kathy Bradley, has also retired or moved on. She's actually officially retired after 33 years, having started back in the late 1980s in that role. So in the interim, I'm finalizing an updated job description for that position. We are relying more on Rachel Clow as a recreation manager for managing the recreational program side of things. Bill Pagliarini, who is our Parks and Grounds Superintendent, taking on a lead role in that area, as well as Charlotte Markey, who continues to serve in that capacity as a Senior Center Manager and Coordinator of Senior Programs for us as well. And we'll be working very closely with that particular team as we go forward, and hopefully we'll be looking based on the level of interest and the number of qualified candidates that are out there for this position, hopefully for an appointment sometime in November. You know, I placed the bar high on every department head position that we refill, but I would say, you know, in this particular role, the Community Services Department, based on its interaction with senior services, vulnerable populations, its interaction with Bob Horling and mental health and substance abuse prevention, as well as our Parks and Grounds, and our interaction with athletics and school programming, as well as recreation, the arts, any number of other things, major activities, community gatherings, interaction with our business community is really a critical position in terms of us maintaining the quality of life standards that we have here in East Greenwich and potentially even improving them. So we're going to take our time. I'm out recruiting through various avenues on a statewide basis to see what caliber of candidates are out there. So we hope to have good news within the next month or so and be able to bring a recommendation to the council for their consideration at that time. Beyond that, the final item is I alluded to it in our last meeting, but I didn't really give you much information. So in this week's report, I did provide you the full summary on the S&P Global Ratings in terms of the bond refunding that the town went through recently in terms of refinancing of some debt, just under $30 million through RIBEC, the Rhode Island Health and Educational Building Corporation, for debt associated with our school district. So we went through a ratings call with a number of people on that call. Our fiscal advisor, Steve Massaroni from PFM, Trish Sunderland led that call, as well as we asked Lisa Bourbonnais to also participate regarding her expertise in commenting on some of the growth that we've seen in the commercial and real estate side of things, as well as just provide some other anecdotal information on the history of the town itself. So we were pleased with the outcome. We overall received, I think, an extraordinarily favorable report. All in all, we were able to we were actually able to get assigned a AA+ long-term rating on that refinancing of debt with RIBEC. We affirmed the AA+ long-term rating on the existing debt that we had in place with RIBEC, as well as we were able to affirm the AA+ rating with the town's general obligation debt. So when you look at a Moody's review, you would be looking at something a little bit different than a AA+. You might also see a AA1 rating. And so that's really the highest rating in Rhode Island. We share that with 4 other communities, so we're one of 5 that share that strongest rate. And you know, we always talk about ways to increase it and potentially become the first AAA rated community in the state, and I think that's clearly a goal. Would have been too much to ask for in the climate that we're in. But I think as you look through that report, and I don't need to go through it in any depth, but it's very favorable in a number of areas. I can just give some brief comments. One is that the rating agency felt we had an extremely strong economy locally, which I thought was favorable. They also were very high in terms of our management and the financial policies that we have in place. Their review and the information that they were looking at was from FY19, so it's not even FY20, the audit that's being done right now. So they felt that there was adequate budget performance in FY19, but they also alluded to the fact that they expected to see some improvement in that area in the near term, and I would expect that as we finish up the FY20 audit. They felt we had strong budgetary flexibility, extremely strong liquidity, strong debt and contingent liability, but they did make note of the fact that we definitely have large pension and other post-employment benefit obligations long term, and really at this particular point in time, dealing with the health pandemic and an economic crisis, we are not budgeting added dollars into those areas, but it was made very clear to them that clearly once we stabilize and come out of the existing environment that we're in, we're going to again reinitiate investment in those two areas. So beyond that, I think it was extraordinarily favorable, and Trish and I are very pleased with the outcome. Trish will be following up with an additional report for the council on some other debt that had been refinanced, where we had been projecting to receive, I think, about $3.8 million in savings. But after that process finished, we actually exceeded that, and we'll be looking at about $4.3 million in savings over the term of that debt. So Trish will be reporting out on that in subsequent meetings. And so, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of information there, and I know it's a lot to swallow, but I just try to provide the council and community with as much as possible, and you kind of filter through it and focus in on the areas of interest. That's really all I have to cover tonight, Dr. Swig. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them or rely on some of the professional staff that are on the call.
As I have a quick question, I know this has come up before, but the OPEB liability and the pension liability, those are not unique to us. Am I correct? I mean, we are many towns that are facing the same burden across the state. And am I also correct in saying that, I mean, as far as, going from fiscal year 2019 to fiscal year 2020, we're still in a pretty, even though with COVID, we're still in a pretty good position. We've been able to, our revenue streams haven't dried up like some communities have taken a huge hit on their revenue streams.
Yeah, no, really, that's a great point. I would completely agree. I think something I hesitate to say a lot about it, because I think it might be a little premature. So as we talked about in the past, Rhode Island has an economy that, based on this type of crisis, the negative impact is going to lag a little. I would say our revenues have been good in East Greenwich up to this point. And that's not something that really every community can say. That can change fairly quickly. And I think that's why we've really continued to focus and really discuss it in some depth, what's going to happen with the state budget, what's going to happen with that fourth stimulus, and that's all going to have a significant impact. And, I'm on the call with mayors of inner cities that have a number of other challenges that we don't presently have here in town. And they hear me say and recite some of the challenges that we have, and many of them have said, well, if East Greenwich is concerned and about kind of the immediate future and what's going to happen, then only imagine what Providence, Central Falls, Woonsocket, Pawtucket, and other areas like that are facing. So I would say right now, based on the news we received a little earlier today, I'm more optimistic than I was yesterday. I think the overall deficit in the state budget is going to be critical. And something else we're really focused on is the December 30th, or it might be the 31st date of when the CRF coronavirus relief funds need to be spent, unless there is a change in that program.
Mhm.
That change might be driven potentially by a change in governance nationally, right? That could influence the regulations associated with the CRF funding, and whether or not there's a strong fought stimulus to support cities and towns across the country. What may, if it's not possible in terms of a heavy stimulus, which I think by all accounts everyone recognizes, no matter what party you're in, is absolutely needed. The key is where the funds are targeted. And so if those funds are not targeted where they make their way down to municipal level, the next best thing would be flexibility in the already allocated CRF funds that many of the states are holding on to. And here in Rhode Island, we're holding on to that $800 to $900 million in funding. So that's significant. Right now it's restricted and needs to be spent by the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
So a concern I continue to raise, and it's just, I'm uncomfortable, is just waiting until after the election in November. Our opportunity to make key decisions is closing, the window's closing. So unless a certain number of things that have to fall in line perfectly happen, and that may happen, right, in November and beyond, you're not looking nationally for them to be able to make significant changes in that program till after the calendar year, right? Once everyone is settled in office, we see what kind of change there might be in Congress, and there's a lot of negotiating that has to happen at that level. So that's the reason why I'm always very hesitant by saying that we're doing well today. But I would say in a vacuum, the decisions that have to be made in the coming months are going to be significant for every city and town around the country. So I'll hold on and continue to update the council the best that I can. But I would say if we took a snapshot today, you're exactly right. And our values, our economy in general, I'm not talking about restaurants, I'm talking about construction, other activity, commercial activity in town, has remained fairly strong with projects that were already in the pipeline. So the question is that pipeline dries up and those projects take hold in the next year or so, what's FY22 and FY23 look like? And typically the economy, based on reliance on property tax, reliance on hospitality industry, and also construction, if it lags, we may not see the effect for another 1 to 3 years when that window. So I think that's why everyone who makes it, you're not hearing many comments made around the state, because I think that everyone is really trying to hedge their bets and I think hope for the best in terms of the work that our federal delegation is doing and what's going to happen, this fall and this winter. So that's a long answer. That's a lot of words to answer, I think, a very straight question that you asked me, but it's complicated, as you can imagine.
Oh, thank you. This is a very good, I like these reports a lot. I think they're very comprehensive. I really appreciate them. And I would like to congratulate Kathy Bradley on her retirement after 33 years. I'm sorry to see her go, but I'm sure she has better things to do now. And I'd like to congratulate also Chief Pat Note on getting his on the grants that he's done, especially the fire truck. I think that's
Absolutely
amazing, and everybody's hard work. Obviously, Trish Sunderland and Joe and Lisa and everybody. I think everybody's done an amazing job on. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Other questions for the manager? I would like to second Councilor Englehart's kudos to all of the department heads retiring and remaining. So thank you to all of you. Andy, I do have two quick questions. One on Chelsea Romano is now stepping in as the interim tax collector. You mentioned you're going to hire an assessor to assist her with her duties. Is that the assessor who does the reval, or is this a separate position?
Yeah, actually, and I forgot to mention something too, Mark. So we, I think over time positions evolve and they change and they morph based on management, based on department structure, where needs are. So at one point in time, the tax assessor and the assessor aide were repositioned. They're finance department positions. They report to the finance director, but they ended up working in the new office suite that was developed in the public works area over at 111 Pierce. So in the last negotiation, there were some specific building, which is also located in that area, building functions that were tied to the aide position. So with us moving the assessor to finance, and really Chelsea represented the aide and is now the interim assessor in one person for the moment. We left a vacuum in Public Works. So we're working with Joe to be able to hire somebody part-time to backfill that particular area. And at the same time, Chelsea has really done probably 80 to 90% of the assessor function, but is working on a couple of more certifications that we expect her to secure in the coming months. So in the interim, we have access to an experienced tax assessor who will be working with Chelsea in our office 1 or 2 days a week, and when needed, on a part-time basis, to be able to support her during that period. And then once a final decision gets made on the assessor, then that additional support can cease, and we will look to backfill the full-time tax assessor aide position. So, and the tax assessor function will now emanate from the finance office, where it actually reports from. So it'll be in that suite. And there may be the need for some building modifications in that area. I think there's ample room, but it might require some petitions being installed, permanent non-load bearing types of wall petitions to be able to open up a few more offices in that area to be able to accommodate that. So that's kind of the plan that I think is unfolding. I think we feel very confident in it, and you know, we should know more hopefully in the next couple of weeks as we progress.
Thank you. Also a question on the ratings call from S&P.
Yes.
Do you know how often that ratings call is done on the town finances?
Yeah, only when we borrow, only when we take on new debt.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only time. So traditionally. So at this point, I mean, I think as we just happen to be refinancing debt, so it gave us a good opportunity. I tell you, the reason why we really were pleased with it, we're at a very unstable time, and as you read that report, I'm sure Dr. Swager, it's, you know, there is some COVID concern there. I think a blanket concern, right, for any community, just about responsiveness and reaction, and it drew attention for me, having been my first call here, and to some other areas as well. As you could see, there were some environmental concerns that were noted in terms of sea level rise in the area of the waterfront. So those are all areas that I think we need to focus on a go-forward basis. But you'll only see that level of detail in a call conducted when we take on additional debt.
Thank you for that information. If there's no other questions, we'll go on to unfinished business, item 7. These are 2 ordinances related to our wastewater treatment plant. Item 7A, an ordinance to amend the Code of Town of East Greenwich, Chapter 134, entitled Industrial Wastewater Discharge. This chapter of our ordinances sets forth the requirement for the town's industrial wastewater discharges, and it's basically intended to keep our ordinances up to date with changes in state and federal regulations, with changes in the type of wastewater discharge produced by businesses and industries in our towns. And one recent example was that the DEM and the town staff identified concerns related to breweries, which are a new source of wastewater discharge for our town. So this proposed ordinance will change. The changes will allow the town to regulate contributors to municipal wastewater system through the issuance of permits and through enforcement activities. Tonight is the 3rd reading of this ordinance. Public comment was closed after the 2nd reading. I'll ask for any council comments on the ordinance. And then following that, I'll ask for a motion to pass and adopt the ordinance at this 3rd reading. Are there any comments from the councilors regarding the ordinance? If not, the public hearing has been closed, so I'll ask for a motion to pass this ordinance at 3rd reading, and at the time of passage, it will be adopted.
So move.
Motion from Councilor Zarella. I saw a second from either Councilor Corenthal or Councilor Engelhardt. It was a tie. So I'll take the roll. Councilor Zarella.
Aye.
Councilor Corenthal.
Aye.
Councilor Engelhardt.
Aye.
Mark Schwager votes aye. The motion carries 4-0. The next ordinance is a similar ordinance related to wastewater treatment. This is an ordinance to amend the Code of the Town of East Greenwich, Chapter 197, entitled Sewers. This chapter relates to a wide variety of regulations related to the treatment facility. Mr. Duarte, the Director of Public Works, explained the need for many of these updates to the existing ordinance, including but not limited to addressing design standards, adoption of the annual sewer budget, deduct meter reductions, and fee structures and assessment for water usage. Again, tonight is the third reading of the ordinance. Public comment was closed after second reading. So I'll ask for any comments from the council related to this ordinance. If there are no additional comments or questions, I'll ask for a motion to pass and adopt this ordinance at third reading.
So move.
Councilor Zarella, seconded by Councilor Cornthal. We'll take the roll. Councilor Zarella?
Aye.
Councilor Cornthal?
Aye.
Councilor Engelhardt?
Aye.
Mark Schwager votes aye. Motion carries 4-0. This brings us to item 8, new business. And the first item is a report from the town clerk on plans for the general election on November 3rd, 2020, specifically information on mail ballots, polling places, and informational meetings scheduled for October 15th with the Board of Canvassers. So here to guide us through all of this information is our town clerk, Lee Carney. So I'll turn this over to you, Lee.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
Just hi. Just a kind of a quick overview of a bunch of stuff that's going on around town with regard to the elections. The first is mail ballots. So today was the deadline to apply for a mail ballot application. It closed off at 4 o'clock. It was a very busy day today in the office between visits and phone calls, but we managed. And so far we've processed about a total of just over 3,300 applications out of our office. So been a little busy, but it's been good. Attached to the agenda was a letter that Andy and I wrote to the Board of Elections asking them to approve our request to have our official mail ballot box installed at the police station. They did approve our request, which we're very appreciative of, and that has gone very well now that the word is getting out and people know where it is. Just to remind everybody that that can be used by any community, and there's one in every community. So they're located throughout the state, and it's not just specific to East Greenwich. So it's a very convenient way, one convenient way for somebody to drop off their mail ballot. The other options, of course, are the postal service and hand delivering it up to the Board of Elections themselves. Just to reiterate that we are not, at this time, we are not accepting mail ballots in the town clerk's office here at Town Hall. I made a couple of trips to that box. So far, I've retrieved 591 ballots out of the box so far. So we're off to a good start. Elaine in my office and I empty it every day at the close of business. So things aren't sitting in there for overnight. We try to clear them out as much as possible. The state Board of Elections has appointed a bipartisan pair of couriers that are going to come visit us and pick up our mail ballots that we take out of the box at least twice a week and take them up to the Board of Elections for us. So it's a very secure process. And just to remind everybody that the mail ballots are processed at the state level. They are not processed here in the town of East Greenwich. I just wanted to talk briefly about the rejection of mail ballot applications. And yes, we have rejected some applications. And I just wanted to reiterate that we really do that to protect our voters here in East Greenwich. And the reason is that the application on the mail ballot application is looked at when the mail ballot is actually returned. So you apply and you sign the application, the state sends you the ballot, you have to sign that ballot envelope. If those things don't match, then there is a good chance that the mail ballot could be disqualified. So although I understand the convenience of sometimes doing this for family members or whatever the case may be, I mean, we see it all. it ultimately could cause a problem for that voter in the long run. So it is, you know, it says right on the application, it puts folks on notice for that. So we've kind of gone the extra mile in our office and reached out to some folks that we've had to reject or we've gotten phone calls from folks that have gotten our rejection letter. And once they allow us to explain why that is so important, that it's to their benefit, they've been very gracious and understanding. So I just thought it would be important to put that out there, that it's you're not being rejected, you're being protected. So if anybody hears any feedback about that, those are my favorite calls to take. So you can send them right to me and I'd be happy to explain why we do that. The other big thing is we're still getting questions from people that want to change their mind. They've already applied for a mail ballot and they want to go either early in person or go to the polls. We can't stop them from doing that, but we do highly encourage them to follow through with the mail ballot application process, because if they show up to vote in person, our sophisticated election system on those poll pads will already know that they have applied for a mail ballot, and they will have to go see the clerk and they can vote a provisional ballot. So we really kind of encourage folks to follow through with the process that they applied for. Andy alluded to in his report about the signature training that the Board of Elections approved and offered to pay for. Although it was mandatory for the Board of Election staff, they did vote to make it optional for the local Board of Canvassers. Both Elaine and I took it upon ourselves to do that training. And I just wanted everybody to know that we did put forth the effort to do that, even though it was not mandatory. What else? Emergency in-person voting starts tomorrow here at Town Hall. Starts tomorrow, which is October 14th, and is going to run through October 2nd. It's here at Town Hall on the lower level in the council chambers. Normal business hours, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., except on that last day, November 2nd, it's going to close up at 4 o'clock. No appointment is necessary. It's first come, first serve. We do ask that you please wear a face mask and follow the social distancing protocols, which will be evident here at Town Hall. You'll need a photo ID, and it's just like voting at a polling place. You'll be issued an official ballot that will go into the DS200 machines, just like a polling place. Polling locations, we are not consolidating any precincts for this election for obvious reasons. So that means that all 5 of our regular polling locations are open. That is Precinct 1, which is the East Greenwich High School, Precinct 2, which is Hannaford, Precinct 3, which is Swift, Precinct 4 is over at Cole, and Precinct 5 is at Frenchtown. Just really a shout out to all of our poll workers that have come forward to apply to help us through this process. We've had to hire a lot of extra people, and it is because of these people that we are allowed to run a smooth and safe and an efficient process. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that's come forward. And finally, the Board of Canvassers has posted a meeting on Thursday this week, October 15th. We're going to start at 7 o'clock. We've done this in the past because we get a lot of questions when it comes down to crunch time. So we thought it'd be a good idea to have a public meeting to discuss just briefly some issues related to campaign signs as it relates to the zoning ordinance of the town, the 50-foot rule at the polling locations, and also how we will be handling parking. So some sensitive topics that we will be discussing in further detail on Thursday night. So feel free to Zoom in. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. That's really all I have for now. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them. And if I can't, I think Elena's on the line as well.
I have a quick question. I was just curious. I mean, I know some people might be upset when they go and they realize that they had like maybe a mail ballot, but they want to vote in person. Is there like some way that like the poll workers are protected so they don't have to take the brunt of somebody's, maybe somebody's angry or something like that? Is there, I'm trying to remember actually. is there some way that we?
Well, the first person that they will see is going to be one of the supervisors, and they're going to have to explain, oh, I see that you have already applied for a mail ballot. Of course, they can't deny that person from voting in person if that's what they want to do. They will be sent to the clerk to fill out the proper paperwork to vote a provisional. And, if it's an issue, there are Board of Canvasser staff that are there on hand to handle whatever needs to be handled. But yeah, I mean, I understand that it's a sensitive issue, and people will be allowed to vote a full ballot. It will just be a provisional ballot, and that means it gets processed a little bit differently at the end. And it's a kind of like a cross checks and balances kind of process. So usually when I've explained that to people, they're like, okay, forget it. I'm just gonna follow through. That, I think that word provisional is they don't like that word. So yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you. And the ballot box at the police station is actually incredibly convenient. You can drive up, you don't have to get out of your car. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Council Corinthal.
Yeah, Lee, when you say emergency in-person voting will begin tomorrow, when you use the word emergency, you don't really mean it in the strict sense of the word, right? Anybody can come in tomorrow.
That is correct, but that is the language that is used between the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office. They use those terms in conjunction with each other. So we are following through using that same language. It used to be an emergency, and over the years that it has morphed into something more than that. So we're trying to honor the language that is being used by both of those organizations.
Okay.
Yeah. What else you got?
Thank you, Lee. That is great. I think you are the empress of all things voting.
Oh no, I have a lot of help behind me. So I've learned a lot. I've kind of dove in this time. Really tried to. I just think it's a fascinating process, and it's really a privilege to be able to do this work. It's pretty interesting. So thank you, but there's a lot of people behind me that make it happen.
Yeah, I know Elaine is on the call and the rest of your staff, but Elaine has also been very helpful to me whenever I've had questions. Actually, I drove past the police station and pulled in because I was very excited to see that box there. This is last Friday, and I actually saw somebody drive up and drop a ballot in there, and I was so excited I waved at her, and she dropped her window down, and I said, "Oh, I'm so excited! You're the first voter I've seen in this election." So it's off and running in East Greenwich. I do see some attendees here, and this is an important opportunity for the public to have access to our town clerk for any questions. Are there any attendees who have any questions for our clerk related to voting? For people who are on the phone, I see one person on the phone. I gave the wrong instructions before. I think you hit *9 to raise your hand, not *6. So no questions from the assembled. So we will move on to item 8B. This is a community mental health update by Robert Hodling, commonly known as Mr. Bob, whose official title is Substance Abuse Coordinator, but he does so much more than that. He is really the East Greenwich man for all seasons. So we are happy to give him an audience to give us an update on community health from his observations as someone who's very important as a community liaison for our families and our students. So Bob, are you available?
I am here. I got to play, as all of you know, with my technological acumen, you might have to suffer with my face for a while, but you can hear the voice of my wisdom. If I touch anything, you might lose me. But first of all, I want to thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to be with you tonight. If I could, and I know it's late, I'd like to talk a little bit about some trends and considerations pertaining to mental health that goes back to the beginning of the coronavirus crisis. So if you look at going back at March 15th, 16th, up to present, there's a couple of things that have been cyclical. And as I told the council before, when the coronavirus first presented itself, the first group of individuals that presented themselves as concerns, a lot of people were thinking what was going to happen with the kids, the anxiety pertaining to kids, alienation pertaining to kids. But the first group of people that presented themselves were the adults, one being some adults that were a little bit older and had trouble connecting with support services via Zoom or some of their support meetings, the AANA group, and they had all gone online. And then on top of that, individuals who had addictive disorders and had some of their transport and some of their situations, availability to counseling were truncated. So the adults immediately presented themselves. The kids came on a little bit later, and as the kids began to present themselves, rather than originally the anxiety and the substance abuse, it came in the context of family constellation concerns, because now mom and dad were home. If there was a dysfunction in the family where one of the mom and dad had a substance-related disorder, or if there was a divorce going on, now you had some unusual dynamics that began to present themselves, family dynamics. One of the things that began to become readily apparent as young people began to be homeschooled, there was some jockeying for position in family in terms of who's getting attention at home. So kids that used to say you were a teenager and you were out doing your rutting rituals, connecting with your peers or identifying yourself with other, coaches or other viable adults, now you're at home. And there were a lot of arguments and a lot of adjustments about attention. And you'd have kids who were 14 years old resorting back to infantile type behavior. And so that was the next wave. One of the things that I'd like to point to now is, as we go through all of this cycle, what we're beginning to see now in October and on the cusp of November is almost a reversion back to March. I think that the summer was a great stress reliever for many people. Young people were out to, in some instances, go out and hang out with friends. There were some people who were, even if there were dysfunctions in the family, people were able to get out. The intensity of some of the family considerations were ameliorated. But now that we're beginning to look at the dynamics of some, the blended school situation, where parents are now educators again in some instances, where it's getting darker out and people are beginning to revert back to home situations, we're almost beginning to see some of the same behaviors and some of the same manifestations present themselves as were happening in March. I'll talk a little bit later about some prognostications and whatnot, but in many ways, those highlight the issues. As a matter of fact, things that we're also seeing presented statewide, there's been a 55% increase of the purchase of alcohol over the last 6 months. In addition to that, after a 2-year reduction, possibly a 3-year reduction in opioid fatalities, in the last 6 months, we're beginning to see a rise in opioid fatalities. What we're beginning to see here in East Greenwich, and when I say a rise in this, I'm not looking at overwhelming numbers, but I'm beginning to see clients who are presenting to me, young people. I had 3 or 4 cases over the summer that were doing isolated drinking, like drinking all by themselves. Obviously, you can't advocate for this, but in a bizarre way, kids going to drinking parties, socializing, hiding out in the woods, breaking the rules from mom and dad. Those have been adolescent challenges, marked rites of passages, and things that we've worried about. And obviously you're not condoning them, but there's a social dynamic to that. What's happening now is you're beginning to see young people, and like I said, there were 3 or 4 cases of young people drinking alcohol in isolation. And it wasn't just beers, it was pretty heavy duty alcohol. On top of that, there were a number of, the police department just went out a couple of weeks ago on a grant that was given to them through the Kent County Prevention Coalition, and they did a party patrol where they broke up a party where there was a significant number of adolescents at it. And what was interesting was a huge proportion, at least 50% of those adolescents weren't from this community. So alcohol now is becoming a significant issue for kids again. I would say mental health and alcohol right now are the 2 major concerns for young people. Vaping was an issue that presented itself because, and I'm sure kids are still doing it, but a lot of the manifestations and the referrals to me of it came through school infractions. So you're not seeing those numbers, but I'm sure they're still there. In terms of things that we're doing and some of the challenges that the drug program is meeting, I'm getting a lot of walks in. I think that in some ways it's caused us to enhance partnerships. I think that school itself counseling has had to change. School itself, a lot of our institutions have been forced to change. So for me, I would say maybe 15 to 20% of my work is on Zoom, and you can tell how adroit I am to that because you can't even see my face. But I'm saying about 15 to 20% of my work is on Zoom. A number of clients that we see now, we see taking walks or we'll still meet in person. On top of that, we've made some really unique partnerships that we wouldn't have never expected to have made. Faith Hill Farms has been a place that has done some equine therapy. I know that the school system had their school administrators go through a program there that was highly received. But on top of that, we've done a community forum at Faith Hill Farm, and we've done 3 trainings with young people there, which have included equine therapy. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow night, a support group that we have for adults who have children who have substance abuse concerns, our meeting tomorrow is going to be at the Faith Hill Farm. So again, there's been a number of unusual configurations in terms of how we're getting support. And along the way, almost to just reiterate what Lee was talking about, the partnerships with the police, the partnerships with the schools, some of the local service providers like the Interfaith Counseling people, people from the Kent County Prevention Coalition. Another thing and it sounds really funny because, and I know that maybe occasionally I don't know when to stop, but I don't think people realize how important some of the live streams were that I did early on with the town manager Nada, and then later on with a number of other community members. And that branched off to a myriad of youth-related programs. Sunny Sate and Michaela Shunny now have a show called The Sunny and Shunny Show, where they keep kids connected on how they're handling stress, how they're handling school-related issues. And then another playoff out of that with the ASAP students, they've created an initiative called Lucy's Booth, where basically they disseminate information to adults from a young person's perspective. And Lucy's obviously a play off of the Peanuts character. I think some of the things that, you know, again, have really been forced to modify. The teen center, we don't have a building anymore. So we've been meeting down by the train tracks. And so it's amazing how resilient those young people are. So right down by the train tracks on a Friday night, we'll get anywhere between a low number between 20 people and a high number between 30, 35 people. We'll sit there, we'll hang out, we'll eat pizza, we'll just check in. One of our challenges now is it's getting a little bit dark, a little bit cold, and we might look at making a few alterations to maybe switching over to Saturday mornings. But I think that that's a tremendous testimony to the kids to still want to be connected, to still maintain an affiliation with each other and still hang out with some adults that care about them. I could throw out a whole bunch of statistics to you, but probably the most salient ones that are presenting themselves is that since that March date, the 16th I was telling you about, I've seen 178 people that you would consider clients. And of that 178, the majority, almost half of them have been seen for mental health. And what mental health means, anxiety, family issues, need to be connected with services. And that number has almost, and the number probably could even be a little bit higher, because where I have major concerns, they have mental health, but another major concern is parent support, where 34 individuals have contacted me for parent support. So if you added that into the mental health number, mental health is exploding as a major issue and concern. Now, on the good news, I actually think for a number of kids, the blended model for school has actually turned out to be pretty good. I think that the kids who are going to school, the kids who are presently attending school on the 2-and-2 basis, I think the kids in some instances are at least as resilient as the adults, and in many instances, even more so. So I think the kids who are going to school, most of them, even though they have some anxiety, the kids who are going in, they're okay. I think some of the kids, maybe the 16 to 20% of the students who are at home, I think a number of them are experiencing obviously some distancing from their friends. Some of them had some considerations prior to making their decision to stay home pertaining to anxiety, and maintaining connections with them is imperative. And in many ways, a lot of them are still connected. I think that another thing, I think the school teachers are doing a phenomenal job, but I think they're under an inordinate amount of stress. I think that I'll zoom in with a number of classes or present in a classroom, and it's not unusual to have a teacher in front of a class with, say, 6, 8, 10 students, and then off on the side or on a screen next to them is another home audience. And I think that that's placed the teachers under tremendous stress, but they've done yeoman's work in terms of to meet the needs of the kids. I think that also the district's mental health subcommittee has done a phenomenal job in terms of offering services and preparing for this. But the school part, the education part, has some significant challenges as far as teachers are concerned. Now, I could go on and on. There's all kinds of statistics that I have here. There are all kinds of concerns that I've presented, but I think that as we begin to move forward, the things that we need to continue to try to do is the moat that used to be around the schools no longer exists. Historically, school was a place where the kids went from 7:30 to 2:30, and then they play some sports or get involved with the band afterwards or whatever activity. But now that you have this blended model, the confluence between the schools and the community is enhanced more than ever. Parents are teachers, and that's huge in itself. The need to connect with those young people who are off in cyberspace, some of the concerns that people have over the summers. I think that the thing moving forward that we have to look at is how are we going to continue to create pathways that that keep people connected? How are we going to continue to make pathways that support parents? Because if this is getting to be like March, I think you're going to start seeing more and more parents present themselves as concerns. I think you're going to begin to see more and more adults present themselves as concerns. And I think that one of the things that we've done here with the drug program, with a lot of the partnerships that we have, is that we've created a number of links, but that's something that we have to be really vigilant on. So I know that I've gone off on this diatribe for the last 20 minutes, but I just want to know if anybody had any questions or comments about any particular thing that I spoke about.
Councilor Corinthal.
Yeah, Bob, thank you so much for what you do, because this is a very, very difficult time. And I know that I contacted you a couple of weeks ago because in my course of canvassing, I came upon several teachers who told me they had a lot of stress. And I'm a teacher, and I work in a school that we have, in my school, we have live teaching every day. So I can't, I can only imagine what's going on. And I'm curious, a couple of things. What specifically is open for the teachers, that how they can handle this? The other thing is, what happens when a child in the class has a COVID diagnosis? Then exactly what happens to the teacher, and how do they handle that?
Yeah, there's a protocol that obviously that the school and Alexis would have. I got to tell you too, another thing that I failed to mention, at the middle school and at the high school, the hires of the new administration, the principal at the high school is outstanding, and the new principal at the middle school is tremendous as well. So in terms of supporting the faculty, walking around, opening levels of communications, these individuals are wonderful. They're cheerleaders. They're out on the battlefield, so to speak, themselves. I know at the middle school, Dave Tauber is at every lunch period trying to take some of the stress away from teachers. And I also know that there are systems in place in terms of IEP, employee assistance programs that support teachers. But you know as well as I do, Karen, the thing that where the rubber meets the road is the real life. I'm a little bit scared about what's going on in the school. I've got an elderly father I'm a little bit concerned about. I'm going in, because I love my job, I love my kids, and I also love my paycheck and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm scared. And I think that, again, I'm not coming close to talking to all the teachers, but I think that in terms of some of them speak with me and some of them are relatively resilient, but I think that the building, the tenor of the building that has been established by the school administration, considering really difficult times, and these individuals are very new on the job, has been very, very good and very strong in terms of opening up for dialogue. And again, you don't have to be Albert Einstein to figure out this isn't always, there's still a lot of fear, there's still a lot of anxiety. But I do think that the school admin, and I know I haven't been in the elementaries as much, but I'm sure they're doing a lot of the same stuff. The tenor of support by the school admin has been pretty powerful.
That's great. That's great, because it's a extraordinary time for people that are working with kids every single day and want to do a great job, and feel somewhat, I know, because I hear it myself, feel responsible for the kids' safety and health, and for their safety and health. Very difficult.
Like when you get into the school, the kids are kids, you know what I mean? So the kids that do show up to school, they're a battery charger. They're infectious. That's not no pun intended, but their enthusiasm is palpable. And and sometimes you have to make sure that, like, social distancing is sometimes, it can be a challenge from time to time. But I do think that the schools have done a pretty good job considering all of those variables. And again, how do you account for some of the stuff that you were talking for, Karen? I think the best thing, again, that's happening is the leadership and the atmosphere that's been created by the schools.
That's great. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Hodling? Bob, I have a quick question. I know that you do a lot of work with various programs in town, but that you do need outside resources to make referrals to as well. Do you find that you have the access and availability if you do need to refer mental health, substance abuse, other problems out of town?
Yeah, we're pretty lucky because we've got a couple of things. On the local level, we've got Thrive Behavioral Health that's local, and they do a really nice job. They've got a cadre of people working for them, and they're outstanding. On top of that, I have a really good relationship with Christine King from the Interfaith Counseling Center. And then in addition, there are a number of individual counselors that we've established a longitudinal relationship over a period of time. So for example, Mike Cerullo does a really good job speaking with people, students that might be having some behavior issues or some court issues. Unfortunately, from time to time, since the school year has started, I've had to refer a number of people, nine people, into treatment systems. So 6 adults and 3 kids. And one of those treatment systems was a hospital that was out of state. So again, we've used Kodak before for people who have had methadone maintenance type issues or opioid type issues. The hospitals have been pretty good in terms of taking people in. And then on top of that, I do a lot of work with an organization called the Kent County Prevention Coalition, and they're affiliated with Rhode Island Employee Assistance, and they're also involved with the Student Assistance Program. So they've been pretty supportive as well. And then there are some people that will go to their own therapist and whatnot, but we have a pretty good support network of people that help out.
Yeah, that's great. It's so important to have those resources available to you, and you've developed those over the years. So that is a great safety net for our community. Other questions for Mr. Hodling?
Bob, how are you able to do like group meetings where I know that's very helpful with kids when you get them all together during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. In terms of group meetings, a number of our groups, for example, today, I met after school out in the courtyard out in front. So we're doing distance meetings type things. The other night, in terms of, you can look this one up in your Funkin' Wagonal, but the last week we did something called the Peripatetic Interlocutors. So in essence, I walked around the neighborhood with a bunch of kids and adults. And so the adults, I'm meeting some kids, a lot of the ASAP kids I'm meeting on Zoom. Some of the clubs I'm meeting via Zoom. In Character Ed at Hannaford, I'm going to be going into the school. At Eldridge, I'm on Zoom. And then throughout the summer and throughout even now the fall, there's a number of kids that I meet in person. So the teen center meets in person. We bring lawn chairs, and so kids will either stand or be separated on lawn chairs. And then on top of that, a number of clubs have expressed a desire to either, once again, do Zooms or else walk or meet places. As a matter of fact, we've also had a couple of clubs that have met in the town council chambers and actually conducted some of their business in the council chambers for a brief meeting, just to.
Glad somebody is.
We used it more or less. There was a civic action club and they were doing some stuff. So I don't know if we're going to be able to meet there all the time, but we wanted to show them the halls of justice and more or less use that as like a springboard, as more or less a way of bringing them in and just, making a connection. I introduced them to town manager Nada and whatnot. So we're getting pretty creative. And again, another place where we've met people on 3 occasions is at Faith Hill Farms doing the equine program. So there's been a hodgepodge and a myriad of ways that we've tried to stay connected with kids.
Thanks, Bob. I know you do a lot for this town, and it's appreciated. And I hate sandwich you in these meetings, but we do need to speak to you. And it does give us an idea of what's going on.
Well, no, I appreciate that very much.
Bob, do you think there's a lot of depression going on based on the COVID?
Absolutely. I think there's depression, anxiety. I think how it manifests itself a little bit differently. For adults, I think that there's the fear and the trepidation of jobs. I think there's the fear and there's trepidation pertaining to family constellations now having extra pressure to have to homeschool. I think there are people who have biochemical predispositions towards depression and maintaining your therapeutic contact. Although I think many of the counseling agencies have done yeoman work in terms of keeping people connected via cyberspace, there are some people that need that routine of face-to-face meetings. So for example, when I was saying what was happening in March, some of the individuals that were involved in AA and NA, part of that was their whole socialization strategy. Their friendships were at those meetings. So Joe Smith would get the coffee, Alice Johnson would do the pastry. There'd be a whole social dynamic to that. And when that was truncated to some extent, some of the real significant, the ride to the meeting and a lot of those going out to eat afterwards, a significant portion of that was eliminated. And I think that exacerbated some of the conditions, Mike, that you were speaking to. So there's biochemical predispositions, there's situational. I think that for kids, not playing a sport or not, there were kids that I met last week for that program, the peripatetic interlocutors, that came right out and said, oh my God, I haven't seen you in 6 months. So there are some people that have been distanced from friends. I've also had a couple of situations where people have passed away and the loss and the grief and that whole process has been really hindered by COVID, where a really good friend of mine's wife passed away very recently. And this person was somebody that everybody knew, but wasn't able to maybe go through some of the same grieving process that might have occurred even a year ago. And even that has added to, some of the stress and some of the depression. Depression and anxiety are probably the biggest things that are being, along with on the 25 to 35-year-olds, the opioid issue. Those are probably the biggest concerns.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Are there any attendees who have a question for Mr. Hoderling while we have him available? If anyone who's listening in would like to ask a question. While we're waiting on that, Bob, if somebody does want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, well, I think that obviously you can reach me at the town number at 401-230-2246. And that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And on top of that, if people do that, I can come to them. I'm more than amenable to meet. Again, I'd go online. I talk to somebody on the phone, but if they're more comfortable taking a walk through the neighborhood, getting my laps in. But I also just want to say one other thing too about the council and town government, how supportive the town manager has been throughout this. I have schlepped this poor guy into so many things. He gets like a 7:30 phone call 3 or 4 times with me a week. But in terms of coming to our events, and I think what happens is when the heads of a government are involved, and I think that the council has taken mental health really seriously, the town manager has taken it really seriously, and I know that the schools, Alexis Meyer, have taken this really seriously. That's huge. This isn't just something that's being done by one individual. I think the fact that this is an enormous crisis that impacts many people on many levels, and to see that mental health is taken so seriously is inspirational for people, and it's also something that shows that it's not just, you know, lip service. It's something that people are walking the walk.
Bob, we do have a hand raised here from Stephanie Correnti. So if our IT team could unmute Ms. Correnti, and greetings, and please ask your question for Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming
Stephanie.
through.
Hi, I'm wondering who's your mentor? I mean, who are you mentoring? Who's going to fill your footsteps?
Well, first of all, I don't know anybody in their right mind that would want to follow me around. Second
We're
of
going
all,
to need somebody. We're going to need.
and Stephanie, and now I'm starting to get paranoid. Are you trying to get rid of me? No, but Stephanie.
No. Listen, I'm a native. I've
Well,
lived here my whole life.
well, Stephanie, I tell people all the time I got the best job on the planet Earth because I get to get my batteries charged by the kids all the time, and I get to work with a community that cares about kids and cares about other people. And so from time to time, I get calls. As a matter of fact, right now at Providence College and URI, there are a number of the professors there that are interested in having some of their students work with me on internships and work with me, you know, more or less to walk around and find out some of the things that we're doing. It's kind of a difficult fit right now because getting into the schools is difficult because there's some obstacles about who can go into the schools and whatnot. But if somebody wants to walk around with me, hang around in Zoom, or go to a horse farm from time to time, I would love to, you know, to meet with, you know, the more smart people I can bump into, the better off I am.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate all you've done. You've been around pretty much as long as I can remember. And I know several families, very well-to-do families, who have had really serious problems. And you have been instrumental in helping them through those problems. So it's all of us.
Well, Stephanie, I appreciate that very, very much. And it's been my honor to have worked here. So thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
I'm just hoping that you find somebody that can at least fill one shoe.
All right. Thank you. I'll be looking for him.
All right.
Or her. I'll be looking for them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, for participating in our meeting tonight and for joining us. So I'm going to close this agenda item with Mr. Hodling. Thank you again, Bob. And we'll move on to public comment. This is an additional period for anyone who has some additional things to add that were not on the agenda tonight. Please raise your hand using the raise your hand button on the Zoom platform, or *9 on the Zoom on the phone. *9 to raise your hand. Seeing no comments, we'll move on to item 10. This is council announcements and comments. Are there anybody on the council who would like to make a comment during this opportunity? Well, we do have executive session on for tonight. Before we go to executive session, though, I don't know that we've ever had a council meeting where our solicitor has not said a single word. So I just want to make sure I can hear your
I'm
voice.
still alive.
There he is, Mr. Tights. Glad to have you aboard.
And I volunteer for the road trip. I'll go to New Mexico to drive the fire engine back.
Yeah, very good. They'll put you on the ladder on the way back. So it does bring us to executive session, item 11. So I'll ask our town clerk to read the motion to bring us into executive session, then we'll take a vote on that.
Yep, sure. That's going to be a motion to convene into executive session per Rhode Island General Law 4246 5A5 for discussions or considerations related to the disposition of publicly held property where an advanced public information would be detrimental to the interest of the public.
Thank you. So I'll ask for a motion on that agenda item.
So moved.
A motion from Council Corinthal, second from motion for Council Engelhardt, second from Council Corinthal. Council Corinthal,
Aye.
Council Engelhardt,
Aye.
Council Zarella. Mr. Zarella, are you on?
Aye.
there?
Done already.
Okay, and Mark Swiger votes aye. Motion carries 4-0 to bring us into executive session. So we will sign out of the public meeting onto an executive session platform. After the executive session is completed.
I did say aye, I'm stuck.
Well, hopefully you'll unfreeze for the executive session.
Hold
Once
on.
the executive session is completed, we will come back into public meeting to report out any actions taken during executive session. So I'll see you all in a few moments in executive session. Thank you.
I was there, it froze on me.
Yeah.
First one, the executive wins.